Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Here we go. At UNBOSSED, I interview amazing women in Chicago. There is so much woman power in this city that I want to provide these women a platform to tell their story. Please connect with us and please consider supporting by sharing, liking, commenting the podcast. Tell all your Netflix friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for a guest, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. I hope you enjoy and welcome to the show. Senior Vice President Anel Ruiz is a versatile communication strategist with extensive experience at the highest levels of city and county government, as well as in nonprofit management. Prior to joining CBL, Ruiz served as the first Latina press secretary for Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, leading communication strategy as the city faced crisis after crisis, including the longest teacher strike in decades, the COVID-19 pandemic, and protests and civil unrest. Ruiz previously served as Deputy Chief of Staff for Cook County Board President Tony Prickwickle, overseeing policy and development and managing the county's Bureau of Economic Development, Justice Advisory Council, Commission on Human Rights and Ethics, as well as the Commission on Women's Issue. She also served as the Public Affairs Director for the Chicago Department of Public Health, where she led teams that consistently produced innovative and award-winning marketing and digital campaigns. In addition to her public service, Ruiz honed her operations and fundraising skills in the nonprofit sector at Free Spirit Media and the National Museum of Mexican Art. Ruiz received her undergraduate degree in political science from Augustana College. She is a 2014 Leadership Greater Chicago Fellow and a 2016 Civic Leadership Academy Fellow. Welcome, Anel. Hey everybody, welcome to UNBOSSED, the podcast. Today we are again at my home. You're my second guest at my house, so I'm super excited.
Thank you for having me. It's a lovely home. It's great.
And what you could do, you don't see is like the baby toys all around. So this corner is the nice corner of the house. So don't be fooled by what you see. But today with me, I have Anel Ruiz. She is currently consultant. She is the Olivia Pope of Chicago.
That's very generous. Minus the awesome wardrobe. It's mostly like from home in sweatpants.
But you may know her also as ex-press secretary for the mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot. And so we're going to get into your story today.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming. And thank you for coming over to...
I love it. I love it. Thank you for opening up your home. It's great.
Okay, so Anel Ruiz.
Anel Ruiz.
Chicago, Hispanic, woman.
Yes.
Working in government. Oh, those are the reasons why you're here on my podcast, right? And so I would love to hear a story about, did you grow up in Chicago?
No.
And then how did you got into the Chicago setting?
Yeah, I'm happy to tell you. So I grew up in Mexico. So when I think about identity, because that matters, right? I grew up in Mexico in a conservative Catholic upbringing. And so for me, woman was a primary identifier, right? It both encapsulated how others saw me, but also set certain limits on who and what I could be from an early age. So woman is heavy identifier for me. And then as I was very rebellious from a young age. I pushed against Catholicism. I pushed against all the traditional jobs I was supposed to have and didn't want. And
wait, let me start the timer. Sorry, go ahead.
Yep. I pushed against so many things. So naturally, as I was getting ready, my friends were all thinking about colleges and universities, and I was like, well, it's not going to be here in Mexico. I want to go somewhere else. And
so you were quite older when you moved to these states.
Yep.
Oh, nice.
I was getting ready to think about college, and I said, it's not going to be here.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go somewhere far, somewhere different. I'm an only child. And so my mom said, I guess but you have to go where you have family, and that was Rock Island, Illinois, in the Quad Cities. And so I was like, great, exotic, great, far away, very different, Rock Island, Illinois, here I come, it's going to be fantastic. And it sort of was. I mean, it wasn't super duper fantastic, if I'm being totally honest. But it was, retrospectively, as many things are, really great for me. It helped me think about the world in a way that I probably wouldn't have otherwise, right? I was surrounded mostly by a lot of, like, really well-meaning, but also leaving probably for the first time, suburban kids from Chicago, right? And I was like, I can't relate to your life experiences. You can't quite necessarily relate to me. My college kept, like, wanting to put me in with, like, you know, here are other Latino kids. And I was like, yes, thank you. But also we have very different experiences. But it was also when I joined a lot of organizations that worked with in the community, and I was exposed to this broader nonprofit world, which was really important for me, and like organizers. And I remember vividly working with Latinos Unidos, and they worked with a nonprofit in the Quad Cities, and they were helping workers at meat processing plants advocate for themselves. And lots of my family worked in meat processing plants. That's what was available in the Quad Cities, right? Yeah. They worked poultry and others, and it's very labor intensive and monotonous, and folks were really scared to speak up, right? And they had carpal tunnel, among many other things, but it was also the highest paying jobs in the area. And so that was a really important marker for me. And I think ultimately I met some of the greatest people in my life, friends I still have today, professors I'm still in touch with. And, you know, that moment of seeing how hard I lived it through my mom to a certain extent, but you know, you don't have an appreciation until you become more of a, And so that was very eye-opening for me and very humbling. And my appreciation and humility grew infinitely after that.
I love that. I similarly, I came to the United States for college, so I understand the transition. I guess I was wondering, you went into a major into poli-sci, right?
Yeah.
And so political science. And so how did that decision happen? Like, was it something that you decided once you got there, or do you always knew that that was the field that you were going to go into?
So that's a really interesting question, because these journey questions, right, retrospectively, you can sound super smart about it, when really you're just like, I don't really know how you get there. But I do know from an early age, I was very interested in power dynamics and power structures. And I think it's because I always felt like outside of the power holders. And
how did you, so growing up in Mexico, right, how did you identify power dynamics?
I have the best story. One that sticks with me, and I've told many times, is I was in Wepa, is what we called it. So like high school, I think, equivalent. And I was like, I'm going to be a priest. I shared this with everybody. I was like, I want to be a priest. And they were like, oh my gosh, that's great. Your faith is so strong and powerful. And, you know, you feel that this is what's important to you. I was like, yes, I want to be a priest. And they're like, but you're going to have to be a nun, because women can't be priests, right? And I was like, no. I want to be a priest. I'm very specific.
And giving the lecture.
I want to be the priest. And they were like, no, you have to be a nun. Like, let's talk about it. And I was like, you're not understanding. I want to be a priest because the priests are the ones that make the decisions. They are the ones that clearly everyone listens to, and to use language of the time, which now like makes me cringe, but I didn't have other language. I was like, everyone obeys the priest, right? Whatever they say, you do. I want that, right? I also want the fact that they could wear normal clothes when they weren't officiating. They had the best parties.
Yeah.
They clearly drank, right? Like, this was obvious. I was like, they are living the life, right? Like, they get all the power, they get all the great parties, and they look good. Like, they are dressed well. Like, I've never seen Sister Whatever outside of, like, a drab navy blue. Like, I was like, no, that is not the life for me.
Yeah.
And that tension for me was very clear. Like, I'm not going to be relegated to this other role.
Yeah.
Solely because I'm a woman.
Mm.
And that was, to me, very telling. I didn't yet know how or what else I could do.
Yeah.
But I knew that I didn't want to be in that subservient, in the shadows role.
And so what happened after, just to close up that story, what was the conclusion of that? You did not,
obviously I'm not a priest.
But what changed maybe? And then, did you just give up, or?
So I think it was also probably the last glimmer of hope that I had for faith for me. And it caused a lot of tension in my household because Catholicism already felt heavy to me. It already felt limiting in many ways. And that was kind of the straw for me, where I was like, well, there's no place for me here. There's no room for me here. And so I started to think about who else in my worldview and in my community has this kind of voice and power, and who do people respect? And it always came down to lawyers, right? My world at the time had like a handful of professions, and it was like you could be a teacher, a lawyer, or a doctor. It's never going to be a doctor. A paper cut puts me out. I'm like, I need to take the day. I need a nap. And so I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. That people respect lawyers. Lawyers get a lot done. They seem to carry a lot of gravitas, and people admire them.
Then poli-sci makes sense. So poli-sci is the intro to then to getting a JD.
To going to law school. And, I thought I was going to go down that path. And still to this day, I'm like, maybe. But it was college, like I said, opened up so much more of my world that it was incredible, right? To see how much you could do, how much you could be. But also it opened up America, opened up all these other spheres where there were serious organizers, serious civil society that was still nascent in Mexico when I was growing up. It's much more robust now, but growing up, it felt little to nothing there. But seeing this kind of really vibrant civil society, I was like, what is this? I want a part of that. There seems to be something really impactful about people's voice and people participating in their civil society that was really powerful to me and really attractive.
That is funny because as an immigrant, and similarly to you, I also felt like my Latin American country was too small and limiting for my ambitions towards women, and then women of a specific color, and then women that looked a specific way, right? And so I totally understand that perspective. And also, I would say, as an immigrant coming into the United States, you saw an opportunity that most Americans don't feel today, which is, this is very powerful. I feel the power because it's absent, or there's not as much in other places, right?
Yep.
And you identify opportunities that perhaps locals don't see because they just give it.
You take it for granted. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, like, to me, it was very interesting how you said, wow, like people participate in this democracy and this really like civil rights type of movement and nonprofit and advocating and protesting, whatever it is, activism in general. And then, you talk to an average person, they're like, why don't you vote? Because it doesn't matter,
Yeah,
and
100%.
Completely.
Yep. You take it for granted because it's there, right? Well, I think today versus, when I was leaving college in 2004, I think maybe today folks see how much more fragile it is, but I still saw it and continue to see it with eyes of this could go away. You have to protect it. And also you have to use it. Like, it's a muscle that atrophies if you don't constantly use it, because you see what it could be. And this isn't to belittle my home country, which I love very much, but I also see its shortcomings in terms of, the more you acquiesce to the status quo, the more it takes up space. And so I love the push and pull of the outsiders that continue to push us to the left, and the folks, in government and other places saying, but it's going to take so long to get it done. And you're like, but why? And somehow, right, I'm an optimist, and optimism is hard work, so I'm not naive. But I do think that push and pull takes us to better, more progressive places, as opposed to not.
I like it. I love it. So you are now embedding yourself with the nonprofit world, right? And really getting to learn the ropes of, and then you'll tell me, because I actually don't know, like you getting to learn some of these skills that then are going to lead you to what you're doing now. And I guess like one of the questions that I asked during the prep is like, how does one become, what is the career path for press secretary? So people listening that they want to go in government and they want to do, saw you what you were doing and want to do that, like what, like help us understand maybe your journey maybe a little bit, but also like you told me already, like there's not specific way to get there, right? But give us interesting or give us like tidbits of how you got there, perhaps, and how maybe other people has gone there.
I think there is no one size fits all, as you pointed out. And I really think that a lot of what happened for me was relentless persistence. Like I didn't know that was my goal. Much like I don't know, where I'll be 10 years from now. But I did know that I was unapologetically ambitious, and it's something I want more women to just say, I want more, I want different, I want to try new things. I'm on this journey. I want to dabble in this. I want to try these things on. Do they fit? Does it feel good? Great. I want more of it, right? I just want that to be part of how we talk about our careers. I also... I was never afraid to ask for what I wanted. I tell folks even to this day, I'm very comfortable hearing no. And that doesn't mean I'm giving up. That just means I'll come back later and ask again. Or I'll ask somebody else, or I'll find my way. But as I in the nonprofit world, I've done everything from building playgrounds to writing grants and kind of ultimately ending up in the communication space for a variety of nonprofits, and everywhere I've learned something incredibly important. I worked at the National Museum of Mexican Art, and I really, really took to heart the mission of first voice representation, meaning like Mexicans telling the story of being Mexican, right? No outsiders not portraying our lives, but Mexicans saying this is who we are. That really mattered. I worked for youth organizations, again, very much focused on voice and who gets to speak. And I think that's like early seeding of who tells what story and how you tell a story matters so much. And it's both a curiosity and a weight that I take with great responsibility, right? I consider myself a storyteller. For an administration, I consider myself today a storyteller for my clients. It's all a matter of doing that with the highest level of responsibility to ensure that there's as much authenticity as possible. Obviously, we all kind of polish along the way. I'm not going to pretend that it's this Puritan approach, but it is something, that first voice representation, that I carry a lot, that people's voices carry through. And so working throughout these nonprofits, I realized just the important roles that folks played. And yet, every step along the way, I was like, this is great learning. Folks here really doing great work. And every time, I just kind of wanted a bigger stage, and a bigger stage, and a bigger stage, and a bigger stage. And always in the back of my mind, that, like, you know, that little bug of, like, where's the greatest influence? Where can I exercise the greatest kind of power? Not a dirty word, power, but like
power, yes.
really move those levers.
Influence, power.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was fortunate enough to be at a nonprofit with someone that today is, everyone knows very well, and we were having lunch, woman of color, someone I consider a friend and a mentor, and I said, hey, I really think I'm ready to try something different. I want this other experience. I'd love to work in government. We were having lunch. She says, you know what? Let's go talk to someone right now. And I had a day of impromptu interview. Next thing you know, I am, there's a few steps in between. I don't mean to brush over it. There's a couple more interviews. There's background checks, as one does in government. And then I was in President Winkle's office, working there. And it brought home all of these skills of understanding communities, listening to people, telling their stories, and being able to serve as that conduit for the president was incredible. And so I really...
She was president of the board of the
Cook County.
Of Cook County, yeah, exactly.
And it was one of the best experiences, like really hearing people's concerns, because I've only worked in local government, but I find local government to be the place where you see change happen immediately, and the concerns that matter to people the most, and where folks bring you their hearts and their problems, and you actually can do something. Right? And that responsibility, that, like, going back to the office and trying to find the person that can help somebody else get through whatever issue, incredible. It is ultimately, like, all what folks do on the ground is just incredible. I have so much respect for folks. And so really, I think it was, again, a humbling understanding of influence and power. It is, like, the power to actually get something done for folks, right? It isn't this grandiose, you sit at a desk and, like, people bring you things. Quite the opposite, right? Like, you are out there trying to get these things done. And that is something that I think people don't always appreciate, in terms of just the work that it takes to get something done, but also just that it's not glamorous, right? It's not this, it's not awesome.
It's not actually like Olivia Pope.
Nothing like Olivia Pope. Nothing like Olivia Pope. But it's really great, because I can't tell you the number of times as a Spanish speaker was able to just take some phone calls, be able to kind of remove some barriers. And it's something I take very seriously, and I carry throughout everywhere I go, which is, if my mom can't understand that or get through this process, it's too complicated. It's too hard, and we need to do everything in our power to make it easier.
Totally. I love it. We are right about break, and I would love to know a little bit more about your mom, because you had a story, so we're going to be right back. We're back talking about, you just left me with this sentence that said, if my mom cannot do it, right, it's probably too complicated, we need to redo it. But I also wanted to ask about your mom, because you told me a really cool story about her and how much she influenced you. And I think the story was about her doing your clothes, right? Was
Yeah.
that like steaming or building your own clothes?
Yeah. So I guess to use language of today, people might call her a seamstress, right? Yeah. She like would sew a lot of my clothes and like make a lot of stuff, curtains, things like that. And I forget exactly how old I was, but I was probably pretty young. And I asked her, why did you learn to sew? Thinking of it more as a hobby, right? And that concept of hobby, what we do with our leisure time. And her response was actually very raw and almost kind of gutting in a way, because she just looked at me and said, la pincha necesidad, which for those that don't speak Spanish, essentially is just like expletive, the effing need. Right? Like she needed to know how to make clothes because they weren't going to stores to buy clothes. So she had to learn. Exactly. They weren't going to stores to buy curtains, so she had to learn, right? She was also the oldest of 8, and so the expectations of her were essentially a second mom, right? So she didn't have a traditional childhood, I imagine, the way I did or other folks did, and that really stuck with me in terms of, you know, as I like face my own moments of like challenge or wanting to give up or things are just hard. I think about la pinche necesidad all of the time. And I think about it for women of color and how you just kind of push through because you have to, or you need to, or you don't have another option. You're just going to do it. You're just going to do it. And it's both, it's still brutal to me and also still just really raw and honest, because, you know, those moments when your parents become real people to you and less of like a magical figure. And I was like, oh, that was her sharing a lot with me in such a short way of just acknowledging that our lives are so different, and she has done so much to make sure that I didn't experience that, right?
That speaks like to so much, which is to me is like, I don't know, it's almost as if it makes me proud of who we are and how women have overcome, and we still overcome really, really very big hardship, and then just like push our shit to the side and just plow through it. And it makes me extremely mad at the same time. Because I'm like, it doesn't have to be that hard. Like for us.
Agree. Preach. Like every day.
And so I am conflicted, right? It's like, what do you like? You're like, one side could be like, yeah, but it built character. And I was like, fuck it. I don't want this character.
And I think about it, that part about building character, I think about it in terms of my own kids, right? I'm a parent. I have 2 kids. And when I hear people describe kids of color and their experiences, we hear a lot of the word of resilience, right? As if they're supposed to develop this like tough skin, right? And like, but it makes them stronger. And I was like, I don't need my kid to be stronger in that way. I need him to be empathetic and caring and smart and curious about the world. Like, I don't need him to be naive. That's like, if we're confusing the two, shame on us. But that resilience is a coding. It's almost an excuse to allow
abuse
and
or hardship
or unnecessary hardship or neglect in a way that feels irresponsible. And it's another way to code all the sins that we allow to happen to Black and brown kids in the same way we wouldn't to little white kids.
I mean, I leaving space for that, because that's so big. And then add on top of that gender.
Yep.
And now we're talking about the issues that are coming up right now, which is like, how do we treat our women, and then our colored women in America, and maternity leave, and the gender gap, pay gap, and who's taking care of stuff at home, and the triple shift and
and you don't sleep, right? And I recently posted this photo on Instagram, I think, and it was like a picture of like my littlest kid like pushing my face, and I'm just like looking all like twisted and gnarled, and my caption was, woman trapped between the fine line of ambition and parenting. And that is exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. It's wanting to, drive hard on your career and be the top of your game and still like make it home in time to do homework or dinner or, care about all of these things. Yeah. And I realize, at least for me, and it's something why, earlier I referred to myself as a parent, and I do that intentionally, especially in the workplace, because the moment folks hear mom, they like, oh, well, she's going to leave early, or she needs to go home and do these things. And I mean, they see me there. It's not like I'm pretending to be a man in any way, but I use parent intentionally because it at least removes a little bit and shows that there might be a co-parent on the other end, right? And in the same way that I want, my partner to pick up whatever needs to be picked up, I want the same respect in the workplace. So I intentionally use parent so that it doesn't come with as much of the baggage. But I early on realized that the type of parent I am is not going to be the one that, does crafts with my kids or does all these other things. It's both not who I am, but also not who I want to be, right? Totally. And that was in one of the easy concessions that I made early on, was that's a model I can't follow. And so we're forging our own in our home, right? A different one that is very much shared, but I would be lying to you if I told you I was the primary caretaker. It's definitely my husband, who does a lot of the heavy lifting, and that wasn't by design, right? I think we just found each other and got lucky, right? And it's worked out really beautifully, but I can't take any credit for that.
My husband recently has been taking share of our infants' growth too, and it's a blessing because it allows us to take some time for ourselves and be ambitious. And I totally also understand the thing about saying parent instead of mom. How do we like take now, this is like all of your history, right? And this is all of the things that you brought into now your communication expertise, right? And so like, how do you incorporate these facets of yourself into the craft that you do and how you do it specifically in your case?
That's a really great question. Thank you for asking it.
Oh, yeah.
Because I am both, most folks think of these communication folks as like really tough and aggressive. And anyone you ask out there, you can attest to the fact that I've gotten in my fair share of shouting matches. No pride in shouting, but it happens. And that intestinal fortitude is there. Yes, absolutely. What I think is different, all of that happens. We have the knockout punches, right? And you take the body blows and you get back up and you do it all over again. Yes. Here's the point where I think I take a lot of pride in being maybe a little bit different, maybe more like us, in terms of like shared back culture, right? I really like to get to know people. It matters a lot to me that I know that you are a human being and what that means for you. Because like, I need to know that you go home to your family and you really like whatever weird thing you're into. Great. Because that to me is you and I working, building that relationship, building that connection, Because when we have that knockout fight, because we will, I'm still going to call you the next day and be like, hey, how's that weird thing you're into?
Yeah.
Because we're going to have to work together, even if we're at odds.
Yeah.
Always. And what I also do is I listen. I'm a very good listener, and I will bring your concerns, because you will call me and be like, here are all the ways that you guys are messing up.
Yeah.
Whether it was, you know, administration or a client, or here's what some concerns I have. And I listen, and I'm like, try to find the nuggets of truth, because there's probably something there.
Yeah.
And then I bring it back, because it helps me, it helps my client, it helps my principal be and do better.
I like that.
And if I don't open up that space for us to have those honest conversations, it's just punches.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we got to get some punches in, but we also have to get to that realness.
Yeah.
And where you can tell me, you know, why this isn't working. Here are all these reasons.
Yeah.
And I want that.
Absolutely. I that is very indicative and on brand with what the story you've told. So I love that a lot. I thought with the weirdness thing, not that it has to be weird in a good way. I thought we were going to go somewhere else, which is like, I use those quirkiness to influence the voice I'm going to use for the communication. Does that happen? Or?
I mean, you do have to get to know your people so that you can talk like them.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, I think the more you can humanize someone, the better. So yes, to an extent, right? But I also really respect people's vulnerability and would never use that as a tool.
Not as a tool, but as almost as in influencing the pen with the craft kind of thing.
Always.
Okay.
Yep.
And which gets me to the point of this. What does the press secretary actually do versus what does the public think?
Great question. So I think everyone at the big level thinks like it's always going to be like Jen Psaki, right? That you're at a podium, and that only is because the president, he or she, hopefully there's a she someday, can't be briefing the press at the frequency that the federal government requires, right? At the state and local levels, your principal, your governor, your mayor, your state representative, your senator has the bandwidth to do those press availabilities, right? The volume is high, but it isn't as high as a president, right? So it's not Jen Psaki, right? But what you do is you become the kind of the receiver of all of those media inquiries. So imagine every single outlet asking you all the questions, like, why did you guys decide to impose a tax on cat cafes, right? I'm making up something ridiculous that hasn't happened. That did not happen, so that I don't give away any actual things. But like, you become then the person that receives that and also works with the team to craft that answer. And then you are the spokesperson. That's what it is. You are the spokesperson. So you give those responses on behalf of your mayor, your governor, your senator, your state representative.
And it's the administration, to be clear, right? It's not necessarily, is it policy specific?
It's on all sorts of issues. And sometimes it is the mayor or the governor, and sometimes it's the administration. Right? So it's a fine line. So there are statements that come from the mayor or the governor or your state. There are statements that sometimes that are the royal we as the administration are moving forward with X, Y, or Z.
What was the best part of the job? And then without, again, privacy is important here. So what was the worst part of the job without giving away too much?
Yeah, absolutely. The best part of the job, honestly, was, can I give two? Two best things is, one is really opening up the door for ethnic and community media to be present. So,
which brings me to the point that you are the
first Latina press secretary.
And that for a mayor.
For the mayor in the city of Chicago. Yep. And that, thank you. It means a lot. It's kind of sad to be the first, right? And I'm not hopefully the last. There's a Latino, an amazing man that followed, and I hope more women follow. I always want more women in those roles. But it was really important to me that local ethnic community media were present and available and there. And we all know the state of the media. It's really hard. The smaller you are, the less resources you have, the less reporters you likely have, so you don't have necessarily a reporter that covers the beat. But I made it a point to have roundtables for community and ethnic media, where it was just for them, right? Because the big guys always get their day in the sun, and the mayor would come, and it was, however much time we had, which was always, it was never enough, but it was, something. And it was just ask any question, right? And it was both an opportunity to catch people up on the work that we were doing, but also to ask us questions. We're here to answer what we can and connect them if they were interested in something that maybe was more appropriate for a department or what have you. So that was really important to me, and being able to build those relationships and then call folks and say, hey, you're going to want to cover what's happening tomorrow, for example. I can't tell you what it is, but just be available. And so that their audiences mattered a lot to us. Yeah. And being able to just extend that courtesy, professional courtesy, mattered so much to me. So that's one that was like...
And to that point, just recently, Chicago has become... or the Latino population in Chicago just surpassed, did you see the stat, white population? And so like Chicago is officially more brown and black than white, which then to me is like, this initiative makes sense. Like we need to communicate with not only 30% of our constituents, but there's like the rest of them that, there's 70% that are out there.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And that intentionality, it's the same way that you would call, because we do it all the time, the same way that you would call the big people in town. We all know who they are. It's just a matter of also calling everybody else, right? And that, I think, seems so simple, but it was so important to me and so significant to do all the calls, but also include this group of people that are important to us and reach the folks that we need to get that to. The other thing that I think was really important to me and carries a lot of professional weight for me is being able to talk from a lived experience perspective. You're in a lot of conversations, you're around a lot of tables, the proverbial, you're at the table. I wasn't going to waste that opportunity, right? And being able to speak on behalf of our communities, to speak on behalf of women, to speak on behalf of Latinos, to speak on behalf of, first generation folks, immigrants, all the identities we all carry mattered a lot. And being heard was incredible, right? It's not something that's ever lost on me, right? So those were really great. And I think the hardest or most challenging part for me was so full disclosure, I was also pregnant for 9 months while I did this job, which was great. No complaints there. But it also was just really physically draining. Anyone that's ever been pregnant can understand how hard that is.
Congratulations.
Baseline,
but
also that, right? And that was one of those things where, as I'm assuming all other overachievers feel this, where you give advice that you don't follow.
100%.
Right? Where you're like, don't kill yourself, except I'm going to go over here and just kill myself a little bit. All of the advice I would give anybody else about like rest and taking care of yourself.
Don't work after hours.
Don't do it. I did all of it. I regret nothing. It was, I loved every minute, but also